Hello. Coming out of the pandemic, I found myself increasingly interested in the way that we travel. You see, according to minutes from the Knoxville Transit Authority, bus usage on fixed route buses decreased 14% during the pandemic, but corrected itself to up 17% after the pandemic. But this follows an interesting broader trend of the decline of bus usage. For example, the minutes of the Transport Research Board found that there was a 5% decline of bus usage in Boston and a 30% decline of bus usage in New York. And what I would like to convince you of today is that this statistic should frighten you because, in my opinion, cities that recognize the importance of buses are more humane cities. And this is because buses provide valuable opportunities for social enrichment. And as well, buses are valuable community spaces in and of themselves. So first, let's explore this idea of buses as providing social enrichment. And the first study that led me to this conclusion was a study from the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health in 2018, which found that on the CESD scale, elderly people who received free bus passes reported 0.31 points lower depression ratings on a scale of 0 to 9. And the researchers believe that this is because they spent more time with their children, more time with their friends, and more time volunteering. A similar study from Disability and Health in 2017 found that one of the best predictors of social inclusion among people with disabilities was access to public transportation. And what both statistics point towards for me is the notion that public transportation is a valuable source for people who otherwise may not have a particularly easy time accessing private transport. And it allows them autonomy in their seeking of social enrichment. Next, I would like to explore this notion of buses as a community space. And the first study that leads me to this conclusion is a 2008 study from Transport Reviews, which found that people who rode public transportation received slightly higher amounts of social capital, and that is interconnected relationships of trust. And the next study is from a 2011 study in Environment and Planning, which found that buses are one of the main sources of contact between cultures. And one notion that would point to this contact being an inherently good thing is the notion of the contact hypothesis, which the authors Miller and Brewer studied in their 1984 book, Groups in Contact, in which they define the contact hypothesis as the theory that negative behavior and attitudes towards the disliked group will improve with prolonged contact. But of course, there are some valuable objections to this model of buses as an inherent good. One of these can be found in a 2009 report from Urban Affairs, which discovered that female passengers are incredibly concerned about buses being small enclosed spaces with limited exits. And as well, they're concerned about walking from desolate bus stops at night. And 66% of passengers, according to this study, feel that the security measures as they are not sufficient to protect the safety of women. And the next objection comes from a 2015 article from City and Community, which found that Black men on Chicago public transportation faced high rates of open hostility and quote unquote nice nastiness, which negatively affected their ability to engage socially. And while both of these notions are very valuable objections, I would say that there are solutions to both of them. So in the case of women, it's been found that certain security measures, such as using physical security officers rather than CCTV systems, assuages some of women's concerns about safety. But in spite of this, 88% of transit managers are still in favor of CCTV. So it's evident that there is still some work that needs to be done in that field. And secondly, with regards to community integration and intercultural contact, it's important that buses not be the only source of contact between peoples. Because while buses serve a very valuable role in integrating people, the confined nature of buses and the otherwise segregated nature of the cities that they serve creates an environment for hostilities. So according to the contact hypothesis, returning to Brewer and Miller's work, there need to be pre-existing, quote, circumstances that define the two groups as equal, meaning that these groups need to be on an equal level before they engage in the environment of the public bus. So in conclusion, I would like to say that cities are doing a disservice to their citizens by not providing adequate bus infrastructure. And the reason for this is that buses promote contact between groups and more opportunities for social engagement for vulnerable populations. And while this contact can present problems, I would say that there are steps we can take as a society to alleviate these problems and make the environment of the public bus much more amenable to everyone. And I hope that this ideology is adopted by the American cities at large.